Alright, so today's video is going to be on the floating hands technique when using a hand drill. So to start off, I want to talk about a couple of basic things regarding the spindles for this. With floating, you can use short spindles. This one's around 14 inches, maybe a little bit less. You can use long spindles. You can use thick spindles. You can use thin spindles, or you can use a tapered spindle. This one is scraped so it's thinner on the top than at the bottom and is a compound hand drill spindle. So for those that don't know what floating is, it's a method of keeping your hands in one location on the spindle while still being able to apply downward pressure. What this looks like is one hand is moving up and one is moving down. I typically do it at the top of the spindle. Some people will do it lower. It's really whatever works best for you. So for example, you're moving one hand up and one hand down, and I'm exaggerating it a little bit for this, but you see how my hands are staying in one spot. So the next thing we'll talk about is stances. So as I was just demonstrating, the sitting stance, where you're working out in front of you, you're using mostly your arms, and you're applying pressure mostly, like I said, with your forearms and some of the muscles in your back and sides. The downside to this is you have no upper body weight over the top of the spindle. The advantage, however, is that sitting is easy to use a shorter spindle with. If I was going to try to make a fire with this short spindle, it'd be very awkward to be up in a kneeling stance, for example. Alternatively, there is what's called the kneeling stance or bow drill stance, where you're working inside your leg. Now this does work, and it works well, but with short spindles like this, it's not very easy. And then there's the assisted kneeling stance. This is a situation where you want to have as much body weight as possible going over the top of the spindle. So maybe you have it weighed down on the sides with rocks. I often will just use another fireboard or other stick pinned under my knee to hold my fireboard in place. And then you're working directly over the top of the spindle. This automatically puts a little bit of extra pressure just from having body weight. So I'm going to be demonstrating on a fresh set today. That's going to be a cottonwood root fireboard. This one's around a ½ inch thick, maybe a little bit more. And a horseweed spindle, or mare's tail. This one's around 22 inches, I think. So just like any other time with the hand drill, we're going to make a pilot hole, and I'll make it right about here. You want to keep it about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of your fireboard. Some people will do deeper notches. I feel like that restricts airflow getting to the coal. Now, the advantage to having a deeper notch is that the wind will be less likely to blow your coal away or apart. Disadvantage, as I said, was it's deeper in the fireboard, so you're going to have to carve it more, and I think it restricts airflow. So I keep mine within about 1/4 inch from the edge. You want to keep this divot large enough that the spindle will sit in the hole, but not so big as to where there's extra movement. If you make it too large, your spindle is going to try to walk around, it'll wobble, and it ultimately isn't going to be very helpful for you. So here's what we've got. It's nothing very big, it's not too deep, you don't want to take away much material. So I'm going to use the kneeling stance for this. and I'll go at a bit of an angle so it's easier to catch on the camera. So I'm holding my fireboard down under my left foot, and I guess I'll probably go the other way so you can see the board a little bit better. So I'm holding it under one foot. I'm on top of a piece of cloth because I'm in the sand here, and the sand can be kind of difficult to work in with friction fire. I'm holding it under the ball of my foot, not the arch. The arch isn't as stable. It can wiggle around a little bit more, but if you hold it under the ball of the foot, it's very steady. So I'm going to start with long, even passes on both hands, with one hand going up and the other going down simultaneously in a circular motion. I'm able to apply significant downward pressure for this, and I'm starting to warm it up right now, starting to get some burn, and I don't know if the camera is going to capture it, but there is some smoke. So we're going to go until it has a full burn. And there we go. You always want to have a full burn-in when you're setting up a hand drill. If it's not burned fully to the diameter of the spindle, you might not cut your notch at the proper depth. So while I was warming it up, I did make a pass down the spindle. The reason for that is floating is a very good technique for warming up a set. But it still oftentimes won't match the pressure that you can get in a full pass. There are some people that can float full coals effortlessly every time. I can float a full coal once in a while, but it's not that easy. It's very exhausting for me. So I often will use floating to warm up the set and start building punk. And then once it's time to go for the coal, I will start making passes. Alright, so I've got my notch about where I want it. I carve fairly deep square notches, so that oftentimes notches will be triangular. I like to make them more squared. I feel like it gets better surface area contact with the punk that way between the spindle tip and the punk. And you know it's carved deep enough when you can have the spindle in the burned in hole and see about a third of it through the bottom of the notch. And this doesn't usually show up well on camera when I record myself, so I do apologize. But that is burned in and cut in well, so we can go ahead and go for our coal. And I will be bringing this coal to flame. I'm going to use a chip of wood for my coal catch. That way I have a smooth surface for the coal to fall onto and for the punk to build on. I'm going to keep my tinder bundle just off to the side of me. And I want the ground to be pretty flat. If it's angled much, that can be difficult to work with. So again, I'm going to start with floating, moving one up and one down simultaneously while I'm applying significant downward pressure. And you can see some smoke. I'm going to float as long as I feel comfortable with it. If I need to make passes, I will, and I'm not going to be talking so much. and we have coal. So I'm going to tap the back edge of the fireboard and lift up and away and feed any extra punk. And here's the coal. Try to bring it close. So the coal is like the smoking end of a lit cigarette. It's strong enough to survive on its own for a few minutes, but with this wind I want to be very careful with it and get it right into a tinder bundle. Alright, so my coal is in the tinder bundle. This is processed juniper wrapped in willow bark and then juniper bark. I'm going to move everything so that I can use the cleared spot that I was working on top of, and just drop my tinder bundle there once it's burning. There's two main ways to bring a tinder bundle to flame. There's blowing the coal to flame just with breath from your lungs. This is what I typically do to get a coal started if it's not taking very quickly. My preferred method is to wave in a wide figure 8 pattern. This is just giving the coal a constant flow of oxygen without the moisture from your breath. So I'm going to give it a small breath to get it going. You want to give it long, steady breaths. You don't want to go with short, hard puffs. So it's burning well. So I'm going to pinch the tinder bundle, move it in a wide figure 8 motion. The more smoke you see, the harder you can blow, or the harder you can wave. I can feel it getting hot, and we have fire. So I'm just going to let this tinder bundle burn up, set it on its side. So if this information has been helpful to you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. With the floating hands technique, you often can use less pressure than making normal full passes. I still probably have 2 more coals in that spot because of that. So again, we floated for the majority of the time while we were making this coal, made a singular pass, and we had fire shortly after that. So thank you for watching, and we will see you in another video.